Hi, my name is Steven Snyder, and I am here with James Ellsmoor for one of our leadership interviews. I'm really excited to have James as part of our Next Gen Lead program. He's a excellent leader. He's done a lot of great work in his startup and a lot of things that he'll tell you a little bit about. But I was really happy to meet James almost 2 years ago at a conference in the Caribbean. Um, we both have a love for the Caribbean region and islands in general. Around sustainability and development. So, James, let me not take too much of the spotlight and let you tell us a little bit about who you are and what your background is.
Hey, Stephen, thanks so much for the invite. Really happy to be here. So I started Island Innovation after being fortunate enough to have the experience of working in the Pacific Islands, then for a while in the Caribbean, and then coming back to the UK where I'm from and learning about the Scottish Islands. And what struck me is, although obviously there's huge differences between these regions, there were certain similarities that bound them together, and not necessarily the connections between them that I thought would be beneficial to all these regions to share really information and opportunities. And so I started Island Innovation simply as a newsletter where I would summarize stories and with the broad scope of sustainable development and my particular interest in energy from different islands around the world. And it kind of grew from there to be a much larger network. Now we have 30,000 people in our immediate network and all different kinds of stakeholders that are involved in sustainable development, really just to share information with this common theme of islands. Islands have their unique characteristics. Some are small, but some are large. There's only so much you can say that binds them together. But many islands can really benefit, and I think using the digital connections that we have now is a huge opportunity for islands to reach this kind of global community of islands.
Mm. Yeah, and I think that's something that stuck with me from meeting you and learning about that, of how there are these solutions halfway across the world that can be applied to a context within the Caribbean, right? Like a lot of the same challenges that Pacific Islands are facing are similar to the problems that Jamaica and the Caribbean are facing. So that's something that really struck with me. And then also how you're using that network to provide people to get people together to talk about these solutions.
And the name Island Innovation came out of the fact that really for many islands, or people living on islands are often forced to innovate and be creative because by being on an island, you have constraints. Again, depending on the island, you might not have a Walmart you can go to and get everything you need. So you find ways of getting around that and making do. And to take specific context, the energy context, many islands have really, really high electricity costs. And so this is a driver to find alternatives, in many
Mhm.
cases, renewables. And so things that would not be economically viable on a mainland area might be far more viable on an island area. And
Mhm.
so for me, this idea of innovation is obviously changing things, but there's an aspect of innovation which is really just taking ideas from different areas and applying them to new contexts. Like most ideas are not new, even if people pretend that they're new. They're taking concepts that exist and applying them to new contexts, whether that's geographical, whether that's between different sectors. And just trying to bridge these gaps is sometimes the problem.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And part of that is like being able to get the knowledge base to find those solutions and put them into use into those specific contexts. Um, and so there's like a bunch of different stakeholders involved. There's a bunch of different levels from like public and private. And I found within your network, within your Facebook group and between your groups like Twitter presence, that there's a ton of people out there who are working on these different solutions, and connecting them is part of that.
Yeah, and something really simple like a Facebook group can have really interesting implications. I remember seeing someone from the South Pacific post about an energy project that was happening there, and then someone from Jamaica replies on that and says, this is what's happening in Jamaica. Someone from Scotland then replies in Mauritius. And, it's only a Facebook group, but yet by sharing and creating connections that didn't exist before in what is a globalized world, you're allowing people to learn. And most of the time, we have these amazing inventors like Elon Musk, although there's obviously he can be controversial, but you have these people who are held up as amazing inventors. Most of the solutions that we have exist already. The issue is not technology. We have okay, not all the solutions we need, but there are plenty of solutions that we have that are not implemented.
Hmm.
And so, you know, one of the barriers is often policy and finance actually to get things to happen. I mean, that's,
Hmm.
again, doesn't apply in every situation, but I think that trying to, we don't need to create new tech solutions always. We have the solutions. It's about actually getting them implemented, which in some cases can be just as hard as coming up with the technological innovation in the first place.
Yeah. Is that something that drives you? That like why you are so motivated to like put this together is that you're helping to put those solutions or like to get those people into the same room to find those solutions?
Yeah, I mean, I'm aware of the limitations of what we do. We're really just starting conversations, we're not
Mhm.
implementing the projects themselves. I would love to be more involved with implementing the projects, but there's only so much we can each do individually, right? Um, but I do think that we've seen a lot of sparks come and connections made through our network that are leading to change. And sometimes this is not even obvious. I think
Mhm.
there's maybe sometimes we'll know when person A meets person B and they go on to form a partnership, but it might just be that person A attends an event where person B talks about what's happening on their island and makes a small change in mentality and thinks, oh, we can apply this to our own island.
Mm.
There was an amazing speech, which you might have seen this week by the Prime Minister of Barbados, Mia Mottley, that came out. And she talked about how many small islands have this, I forget the exact words she used, but kind of an underappreciation or almost a lack of confidence. Um, and that, why is this? There can be amazing things coming from a small island community. Not everything has to come from the US.
Mhm.
So we should look to say, okay, how can a small island be a leader in a certain element? And there've been lots of, really interesting innovations that have come from different islands around the world, as I said, particularly in the energy sector,
Mhm.
that hopefully at some point will be applied to um, the wider conversation. So we have to be careful. I don't like the something, maybe it's just language here. I don't like the language when islands get called laboratories or test beds. I think you have to
Mhm.
be careful around that because that implies that it's outside people experimenting on them. But I heard some colleagues in Scotland in the Orkney Islands, they reframed that as lighthouses. And they said, well, what we're doing is we're creating something that benefits the local community. It comes from the local community. And then we are showing other people how great this is and how we want to share what we've learned to those. And so it's a subtle difference, but I do think it's an important one.
Yeah, and what a powerful metaphor as lighthouses help guide the way
Yeah, I
and
love it.
protect the wider community. Um, and that's something that motivates me as a Jamaican as wanting to contribute to my island community. Where do you see, island innovation going? Where do you want to take this and achieve with it?
It's so difficult to make plans right now with the world as it is. I mean, the goalposts seem like they're constantly changing. It's been a very fluid journey, and the way that I work is I don't always have a destination. As long as I see things growing and improving, I'm happy, and that works for me. It doesn't work for everyone. Um, and so I feel like we're constantly growing and improving as an organization, and I'm happy with that. I mean, some of the things I want to build out the media side of the platform, so or a space to share information. And, historically that's been a bit random when things have come in and I've had some time and I've written something. And I want to have a more cohesive information platform to be built out. And we did our big event this year that you were involved with, the Virtual Island Summit, had over 10,000 people register for it. And I think that was great, but it was a whole lot of information taking place in a very short period of time. And so
Mhm.
thinking about how we can make information more accessible. I
Mhm.
read a really interesting idea, which was peak content, that we're in peak content. There is so much information and content. That's not the issue. We can all find information, but it's about presenting it and making it available in an accessible form. And so what we're doing is taking all of this information that's buzzing around the internet and trying to simplify it and kind of highlight what we think is most relevant for the people in our community. And I think there's a value in that.
Yeah. And what's really cool about that event was, that's the second one you've done in the past 2 years. You were doing this before everything moved online, and you were really driving like the change and innovation within this sector of virtual events, where I've been to conferences, you've been to conferences. There's so much travel that goes into that, to just go spend a week
Hmm.
in somewhere beautiful or in some conference room. And now we can do it all online and have these really productive conversations from our bedrooms, right? And build connections on that, and build innovation on top of that. So, maybe what it is, I guess what I'm trying to say is, how does that inspire you?
How is it? Well, I think with this area of virtual events, it was funny because I saw this as the way that we were going anyway. This isn't a new thing. This was something that existed and was accelerated by COVID. Like a lot of things have been accelerated by COVID. Businesses that were on the decline have this was kind of the final death knell, but they
Mhm.
may have already been on that. Equally, other businesses that were growing in some areas have had this new opportunity. And I saw with we were already moving to the fact that many jobs, I won't say most jobs, many jobs, doesn't really matter where you are. You just need a computer. Um, and so I was involved in a community of people called digital nomads, which I know is kind of an obnoxious term. And some people, particularly pre-COVID, people would kind of raise their nose, sneer a little bit about that term. But it was people who essentially wanted to be able to travel and work. And many of those jobs were in the kind of marketing, communications, design space because they were particularly portable jobs. Um, but what I actually realized is many other jobs could be done remotely. It was more about, and I won't say policy, but almost like institutional policy. Organizations were set in their ways. This is how we do things, even if it was a long-term benefit to the organization to move towards this. It was a risk that they weren't willing to take, and because they were
Mhm.
forced to do, like we saw Twitter. I think it was Twitter, their employees are all going to stay at home forever now, and I
Mhm.
think a lot of companies will see that. And of course, there's pros and cons to this. I mean, I think a lot of people have really struggled um, by moving virtually completely for their work. But that's also because we're in a very strange time where we can't go and socialize normally. And I think we're going to reach a happy medium at some point as
Mhm.
things return to the new normal, or not return, as things move to the new normal. We will have we'll be able to take advantage of the benefits that this flexibility and technology gives us, but also we'll be able to kind of still have that human contact that we need as you know animals that are have evolved in that way.
Right, right. And it's really cool to see how organizational structure is changing, right? Where there was a lot of risk beforehand in moving to this, and maybe the organization wasn't set up to facilitate this. But now companies are learning that they have to adapt and innovate to operate within this paradigm, and will change in some way to a normal paradigm of being able to socialize
Mhm.
and such. But there'll be long lasting effects of how we work and do what we have to do, right? um
And I also think, on that point, just quickly, for many companies, it might be that the company didn't want to take the move first because they were worried it would upset a client by working virtually with a client. The client was maybe worried that they wouldn't get the full their full kind of investment back by allowing a company to do that. And so you had situations where people were flying across America twice a week just to, I mean, I had friends that work for like big companies like Deloitte, were based in San Francisco and will be stationed on projects in Colorado or even Florida. And it's just like that is not logical, right? Why are you
mhm,
flying twice a week and then going home for the weekend to the other side of the country? And as soon as it moved online, it was like, oh, actually, this is way more efficient for everyone. You know, why have we not been doing this ever? Then maybe sometimes, I'm not saying they won't ever need to fly.
Hmm.
A lot of things are way more efficient. So I hope it's kind of woken people up to the fact that, travel is fine. I don't think we should stop people from flying at all. But the volume, a lot of that flying was actually coming from business travel. And so it always gets framed as, oh, you want to ban people from their annual holiday. It's like, no, actually, they're not the people that are really causing the problem. I mean, flying as a whole is a problem. But when you have companies that are flying their executives all over the place every other day,
Hmm.
that's where the real waste comes in. We're not telling people you shouldn't go on your annual holiday. We just need to find ways to cut flights, and a big part of that is business.
Yeah. Yeah. Really good point there. So, James, we're getting towards the end of our interview here. And what I like to end on is some words of inspiration for our young leaders. This is an audience of university students, postgraduate and undergraduate. Um, and as someone who's young and who has, established itself in a career that you've helped to create, what sort of inspiration could you provide to maybe someone who's interested in this, or to people who are watching this, of how to become better leaders?
Oh, that's a good question to spring on me. Um, I think that you always need to be prepared to take some amount of risk, but that risk can be calculated.
Hmm.
I always think about when I'm making a decision that involves some level of risk, what is the worst case scenario? And in a lot of situations, that worst case scenario isn't that bad. It's something that I can deal with in some way. If I'm gonna lose my house, then maybe it's I'll rethink it. But it's most decisions are not like that, right? So I do think a lot of people kind of err on the side of caution, and which is also fine sometimes. You can't say yes to everything, but also feeling comfortable to take a risk sometime, and not worrying if that doesn't work out. And
Hmm.
I've kind of built Island Innovation is quite unusual in the type of work that we do, as we do a lot of random things. And that's because I've really been experimenting for the last 3 years. Okay, let's try this. This works, this doesn't. This works, but we need to do something differently. And I've just been experimenting and building it up to the point now where, we have this big network, and we're kind of going through a new stage as we're starting to graduate from a startup into whatever comes after being a startup. But it's been a long process. And I mean, the second thing is, I also feel like I'm constantly learning. Like, I have been interviewing this week, interviewing people for a new job position that we have at Island Innovation. And to be honest, I feel like I've learned as much going through that process of interviewing all these people as anything else. It's been like, wow, I wasn't expecting people make points about our business. So I've learned a lot, and sometimes these are people that don't have as much experience as me in these areas, but yet everyone has something to contribute. And so, yeah, I feel like everything I do, even if it's seemingly unrelated, does contribute to my thinking in some way.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree with you on that point of how we have something to learn from everybody, and how, even with these interviews that I've been doing and watching, I've been getting inspiration and hearing from other people, um, really great points that I can take into my own life. So we'll do a little risk assessment and include that as part of our program too. James, thank you so much for this really great interview. I'm looking forward to seeing the growth in Island Innovation, and everyone here, you should definitely check out the Facebook page and join there if you're interested in this topic at all. It's a great, great community. I really love going through it. James, thank
Yeah,
you so
and
much.
you can find the most recent event. You can see the recordings at virtualislandsummit.com, and do check those out as well. But yeah, thanks so much, Stephen. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, James. Take care.